Swimsuit? Check. Sunscreen? Check. Phone charger? Check. Don't forget to pack the 5-Hour Energy. It fits great in a pocket or carry-on, and the alert feeling will help you arrive ready for anything. Now get 20% off when you use code 5HETRAVEL at 5hourenergy.com. Expires April 30th. One-time use only. Not valid with other discounts. Remember, visit 5hourenergy.com and use code 5HETRAVEL to save 20%.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies, and today we're talking about VBACs, vaginal births after cesarean. I have Meagan Heaton and Julie Frankham of VBAC Links. They are VBAC moms, birth doulas, educators whose mission it is to make birth after cesarean better. They are VBAC experts who provide evidence-based education support and have a community of like-minded people to help those that are pregnant and want a VBAC have that support through their journey. So I was talking to Meagan for this, and we talked about everything from stacking the cards in your favor to have a VBAC, VBAC myths, finding a supportive provider, and a VBAC calculator. I'm going to be honest, I did not know about a VBAC calculator for quite a while, and I had been in this world for quite a while. So it was fun to learn something new and just so much more. So those that are pregnant or support pregnant people or just interested in a VBAC, or those that are looking to have a VBAC, I think this conversation will absolutely inspire you. Before we get to that, I just want to say thank you to the community that has continued to support us online, but also now meeting us in the studio. I'm back in the studio teaching, and we are doing a hybrid. So I'm going to be fully honest that the first hybrid class was a little bumpy. I didn't understand totally how the internet was going to be in the studio space. It was a little bumpy, but now we're in the stride of things and it is going so well. We've got people in the space. We've got people online. And what's beautiful is while we're doing our circle time with the people in the studio, we have the computer face so that those online can see the people in the studio and those in the studio can see the people online. I've got a couple different monitors around. So we're just taking our community and just bursting open, and it is so exciting. I really am thrilled about that, and I'm honored. So thank you for those that are continuing to work with us, and we can continue to support each other online and in person. Also, I know that not everyone can get to class as much as they may want. So if you have some aches and pains that you're dealing with between classes, head to our website and download 5 simple solutions to the most common pregnancy pains. And then have your cheat sheet. So when your back hurts or your neck hurts or your hamstrings hurt, you've got a few poses that you can pull out, grab a mat, not even needing a mat, and just take care of yourself. I also want to thank those that have left a rating and review. It helps people find us. And if you haven't, I would just ask that you consider taking a moment and leaving a rating and review. Thank you for being a part of our community, and thank you for continuing to support our growth. Okay, the very last thing I'm going to mention is we've got 2 more teacher trainings online for 2021, and then we're back in person. So in January and February, we're going to be in Washington, D.C. at Willow Street Yoga. And then I'm so excited back. And then we're going to March and April back in New York City. Well, it will be 2 years since we've done, more than 2 years since we've done a face-to-face. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. So lots of good stuff on the horizon, and just keep checking out our website for what else is going on. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Meagan.
Looks like you need a vacation. Enter the 5-Hour Energy Where Will the Tide Take You sweepstakes. You could win a $10,000 dream beach vacation. Imagine jet setting off to a tropical paradise, having fun in the sun, or diving at a gorgeous reef. It's up to you. No purchase necessary. Go to 5HETide.com for official rules and to enter. That's 5HETide.com. Enter today. Ends June 30th, 2024.
Hi, Meagan. How are you?
I am so great. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm so excited to speak with you. I heard about you guys, I think, honestly, online. I tend to spend a little too much time on Instagram. I'm embarrassed to say.
Don't we all? Like, really, though. Instagram is our new life.
It really is. And I try not to let my kids see me do it because it's such a bad example, but I do it. And I think that is how I stumbled upon you. And I think I've been just watching you guys for a while, you and Julie, and just enjoying what you put out there and really agreeing with it. And so then I had a conversation with, I'm sure you know, Dr. Nicole Rankins, and she mentioned you guys, and I thought, all right, I have been looking at them online, kind of like a voyeur, and then Nicole
silent
talked about you.
Silent stalker. That's what I always call myself. I'm like a silent stalker on Instagram. It's okay.
Stalking you. And then when Nicole mentioned you, I'm like, why not? Why not just make this happen? So thank you. Thank you for some time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. So I guess Julie is normally with me, but she's unfortunately unavailable today. So
she's like your silent partner to the side.
Yes, she is. Yes.
So I guess let's just jump in. I'd love to hear a little bit about you, how you ended up focusing on VBACs, and then how you and Julie ended up working together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have 3 kids, and I have always loved birth. Always. My mom used to work in a hospital, and she would do like the stocking. And so we would stock the labor and delivery unit and always stock the nursery. And she would have me come and help. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to do what these people do. I want to be with babies all the time. And then I found myself pregnant and ended up having 2 C-sections, which were completely undesired or unexpected, quite frankly. And, right after my second birth, I just felt this fire inside of me that I wanted to do more in the birth world. I wanted to impact people the way my last nurse had impacted me during my birth. She was so loving and kind and supportive and gave me options. And so I started Googling how to become a doula and what more a doula does, because I had learned about a doula at the very end of my pregnancy, but my husband wasn't super keen on the idea. He actually was like kind of offended. He was like, no, I don't want to be replaced, which it's not about that at all. But, that's kind of his stance on it. And so I started Googling it, and it was seriously like fire inside of me. Like, this is me. This is what I want to do. And so, I became a doula, and I got pregnant again, and I knew I did not want another C-section. And so I started just doing my research even more and learning and growing as a doula and attending births and realizing this was possible. I could totally have a vaginal birth after 2 C-sections. And so I went on to do a VBAC after 2 C-sections. So that in a whole, my own experience is what, really gravitates my love towards VBAC. And Julie also has had 3 VBACs at home after a C-section, and she also kind of found that same spark of like, I want to help people know their options, because unfortunately in the VBAC world there's a ton of myths and doubt and unsupportive people out there. And so she had this idea to start a class here just in Utah. And I was so honored. She asked me to be her partner, and I was super excited. So we kind of hit the ground running and kind of quickly realized that we needed to branch out of Utah and quickly make this an international thing, because there is such a need out there in the world for VBAC support.
Oh, you sparked so many ideas. And I know I'm kind of going a little off script because I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm like, we need to talk about this. So first of all,
there's so much to talk about. We could go on for days. Like, we could have 5 podcasts spinning off of each topic.
I know. So first of all, I want to just say, yes, your partner's so right that there's often this misconception that doulas are going to replace the partner. And I like to think that doulas kind of bring them to where they want to be, and maybe are slightly hesitant to. But I won't go down that rabbit hole, but let's just cheer that it's not a one or other. It can definitely be a togetherness.
And, he learned that with our VBAC birth. I actually had 5 doulas.
You didn't just go one, you brought them all in.
I know. I had to make up for all the births. But I was a doula at that point, and I was pretty like involved in the community. And so I had quite a few people that were like, can I please be at your birth? Can I please be at your birth? I would like to attend your birth. I'm like, listen, the more the merrier. Support me and love me. That's all I want. So
that is
I was so, it was so special. But he, to this day, said, and he will tell everyone, not just because I am a doula, because he's actually experienced, don't have a baby without a doula. Like, he'll tell everyone that.
Yes.
Like, you need a doula, because he was helped so much more than he ever imagined.
Yeah, my husband, same thing for our second. I'm like, do we need a doula? He's like, we do. And even though I hid in the shower for a good part of my birth, I still liked having the whole crew there. So going back to, I do have a question about, I want to jump into some of those myths of VBAC, but let's back up. And there might be some listeners that are thinking, I tuned in and I don't know what a VBAC is.
What is a VBAC?
What is this VBAC thing? So let's go super basic and just, what is a VBAC? And then let's go into some of what are the myths of VBACs? Yeah.
Okay. So VBAC, which is spelt VBAC. A lot of people want to spell it VBACK, but it's just VBAC, stands for vaginal birth after cesarean. And it simply means that someone is going to have a vaginal birth that has undergone a previous cesarean or previous cesareans.
Yep. Perfect. That is straightforward. And there it is. So what are some of the myths when people are thinking, oh, I can't have a VBAC, or just kind of the idea of it?
Oh man, there are so many. But some of the number 1 and 2 and 3 myths would be, it's too dangerous. It's unsafe for mom or baby. Someone is too small to have a baby, because there are a lot of small people out there, petite, I should say. And it's not possible. Like, it's physically not possible. Those are like 3 of the biggest myths.
That someone just says like your pelvis is too small to fit a baby
pelvis
through.
is too small, baby is too big, or, well, my body didn't dilate to attend the first time, so it doesn't know how. And it's not even that they're saying that they, like the birthing person saying that, it's the provider. Like, I had a provider saying, well, yeah, your body just doesn't know how to labor. It can't.
That is, we can dissect we'll go into care providers later. Actually, I would like to go into that, because sometimes I've seen, we can talk about care providers that are tolerant or actually VBAC supportive. There is, I think, a difference. So that is helpful, some of the myths. So what are some reasons someone may have had a cesarean for their first or many of pregnancies, and what makes them a good candidate for a VBAC?
That's a great question. So, some of the reasons that someone may have had a C-section is, failure to progress, meaning kind of like what I said, is the body did not progress, to attend to make it possible for the baby to be birthed vaginally. And, that doesn't mean it's never going to happen. But failure to progress or failure to descend, maybe they reached 10 centimeters, but they were pushing for a very long time and the baby just did not come down. That could be due to a poor position or something like that. Poor position is actually a reason for a C-section, maybe breech or asynclitic or posterior.
Or transverse. Well, they wouldn't even try.
Transverse would be straight cesarean, unless they were to do a version. Same thing with breech, right? Like, these days, transverse and breech, like, they are the reason, like, they just go to a cesarean unless you have a provider that's willing to try and turn a baby, which babies do turn. So it's a thing, but for those positions, definitely a C-section. Maybe fetal heart tones were going down in birth. You're laboring, everything's going well, and then your baby all of a sudden is not tolerating despite movement and things like that. That can sometimes turn into a C-section for that reason. Mom's maybe not doing well, or there's like infection present, and there's, it's not looking like mom's going to be able to do it stamina wise, or it may be desired. Some people just desire it.
Yeah.
So those are some of the reasons. What makes them a good candidate? This is such a hard one, because I believe that the majority of people are candidates. A good candidate is, statistically, they say if you've had a previous vaginal delivery, you are a fantastic candidate for a VBAC. Because you have what's called, and I'm doing air quotes if you can envision me.
Pelvis, you're going to do that?
The proven pelvis. Yes, the proven pelvis, that you have proved that your pelvis can deliver a baby vaginally.
That drives me crazy that it's a tested, but how do we know if we never get a chance? I don't know, that little thing makes me.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'll keep it in.
I know. I mean, seriously, I can go on and on for that. So proven pelvis, or maybe, they reach 10 centimeters. A provider will be more apt to, let someone labor if maybe they reach 10 centimeters, but, maybe the baby just was in a wonky position, like an asynclitic. And so it was maybe harder for the baby to tuck their head and go under the pubic bone. Or if there was previously an infection, but now there's not, that's something very different, right? Or maybe you had a breech baby before, but now we have a head down baby. Those would be reasons that a provider would say, you're a great candidate. But, in my eyes, most everyone is a great candidate for a VBAC. There are definitely some health concerns and things where, a C-section might be warranted and really needed. But for the most part, VBAC, most people, in fact, 90% of people are actually candidates for VBAC according to the AMA. American.
I love that. That's a good amount, 90%. So you mentioned some health concerns. Would you mind sharing what those might be?
Yeah. So, everyone's different with the health concerns. There's some things where it actually might be the placenta that's in the way or something, placenta previa, or that could be dangerous. Or maybe we've got a mom that has a certain blood disorder or condition, or maybe blood pressure is just too high, or the risk of hemorrhaging is really high, even though C-section has a higher risk of that. Sometimes a HELP condition, when the mom is being attacked, it's the liver is being attacked. That can be a reason that a provider would suggest a C-section. Or if there's previous surgeries where we've got shattered hips or backs, and there's lots of metal and the body can't move or the pelvis can't move, those may be a reason that someone would suggest a C-section.
I had a doula client that it was the first time I really saw the role of the provider in this situation. And I'm not painting the provider in a bad way. It just was something that took me by surprise and my client by surprise. So she had kids, I think about 12 years apart, and her first child, I believe, was in Germany and was a cesarean. And then she was up for her second, and she was told the whole time, sure, you can have a VBAC. But by the time she was actually in labor, there was a lot of pressure to go, she was in labor
schedule
to have
a C-section
while in labor to go have a C-section. So we arrived at the hospital, and the reason was that they didn't have her medical records and they didn't know anything about the scar. Was it vertical? Was it horizontal? What kind of stitching was it?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that is another reason that a provider would maybe not suggest,
but she was in labor.
C-section.
That was a surprising thing. They're and they made her sign a waiver saying, if you attempt this, and she's like, I can't sign that. I'll just have the section. But it came of we're waiting.
Every VBAC person has to sign a paper saying that you're consenting and you know the risks.
Yeah.
In the hospital. So that's the hard thing. But yeah, a C-section scar can be, a reason that a provider would maybe deter someone away from having a VBAC based on, like you said, low transverse with a special scar, like a J or a T, or maybe vertical up and down. They don't really do vertical up and down anymore these days. Sometimes if there's a breech baby, they might, or they might do a special scar like a J, another type of special scar. But even then, that doesn't mean you can't VBAC. I had a special scar mama. She had this last year and had a beautiful home birth, with no issues. So it's definitely something that's a personal choice when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you have to really discuss with your providers and find that provider that is going to be in line with your desires.
Yes, it always comes back. I feel like every single podcast I do, it comes back to choose your provider as best
Yes.
as you can. And I know that is a privilege for some that have the option, but it always comes back to choose your provider. So I'm a little bit of a statistics nut because I love data. So you mentioned that about 90% of people are going to fall in the category of sure, have a VBAC. Do you know how many or what the statistic is for those that start to have that trial of labor for a VBAC and those that give birth vaginally?
Yeah. So, the studies show that 60 to 80%, which is roughly like 3 to 4 out of 5 people will, that have had a previous cesarean, gone to VBAC, will actually deliver vaginally.
That's a good number.
Yeah, it's a really, really good number. And, when I say like 90%, like 90% of people should be encouraged and given the chance, but only like 10% are even given the chance or offered the idea of a vaginal delivery, which to me is like dramatic, especially when we're looking at up to 80% of people will actually have a vaginal birth after a cesarean. So, why are only 10% being offered?
Well, that leads me to my next question, but we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about some ways that people can stack the cards in their favor to have a VBAC. And that I think is going to really unfold why only 10% get to be offered. So I think that can start talking us into our care provider conversation. We'll be right back. All right. I feel like this is opening a big can of worms. So,
and sometimes it is. It's really hard because sometimes we, like Julie and I, sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, we sound like we like hate providers, which we don't. We absolutely don't. We love providers and we appreciate them, but there definitely are certain providers out there that we want to steer away from.
So let's talk about between finding a supportive provider and what else could somebody be doing that maybe their baby was coming in asynclitic or breech or posterior before that might have prevented that baby from descending well. So let's talk about all of the things that someone can do to just point them in that favor.
Okay. Well, so we'll start on ways to prepare and up your chances, or like you said, stack the cards and have a vaginal birth. Education is going to be one of the number one things, getting the education and the right education. And unfortunately, as much as the internet is incredible, it's also poisonous because it can provide a lot of just bad information, right? And stats. And so finding an education that's evidence-based and really factual is going to impact you and help you guide yourself through this journey. It will also help you learn how to do things like the mile circuit or spinning babies 3 sisters or swimming and what types of ways to be active to help these sweet babies try and get balanced into that pelvis. For the longest time, the first years of my doula work, it was always get your baby on the left side, always on the left side. And throughout the years, I've learned it's not necessarily getting a baby on a left side. It's allowing the baby to navigate through the pelvis by creating space. And that can be different for everyone. Some babies might actually need to enter the pelvis in an asynclitic position. And so we create space and let them do that. And then in labor, there are things and choices that we can make, like maybe avoiding breaking our water early on into labor, or to start an induction, or when baby's really high, so baby doesn't come down even more wonky, right? And things like that. So education, nutrition, like I said, being active. I'm not saying you have to go run marathons like during pregnancy or anything. A simple 30-minute walk around the block, or, walk up your flight of stairs one time a day. I mean, just something to get your body. Yoga. Yes, absolutely.
That was a shameless plug.
Exactly. No, that's a great plug. So prenatal yoga is something that, oh my gosh, we see. Can I just say this as a doula? I have been a doula for 7.5 years. I have seen people that have done prenatal yoga throughout their pregnancy and people who have not. And I'm not saying that everyone who has not has had poor outcomes as far as like having weird positions that we have to work through. But our prenatal yoga moms, they are so balanced. Their breath, they cope really well. Like prenatal yoga is huge. It's huge and it's so good for you. It's so good for you, especially when you're preparing for a VBAC too. It can be really emotional and mind tolling. And so to find that space during yoga and be with your breath is incredible.
Yeah, when you were talking about finding the space in the pelvis, it is all about space and balance. And like you were talking about the spinning babies, is everything, are we tighter in the psoas or the round ligament? What's going on inside that we don't know can make a huge impact on how baby does descend and rotate or doesn't descend and rotate. So really finding, I also love body work. I don't know how you feel about that, but an acupuncture or chiropractor. I actually, the chiropractor I saw, I think a day before my second child, I actually credit her for my very quick second birth because she did the Webster technique and she's like, you're right. Psoas is tight. I'm like, it is. It really is. And she did whatever she did. And that baby just descended, rotated and kind of like fell right out. And I totally credit that.
Yeah, they're definitely on my list of things to do during pregnancy. With my first and my second, I was like, oh, chiropractors are scary. They're quacks, blah, 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 blah. Well, with my third, my midwife was like, this is non-negotiable. You are doing this. I was like, oh, okay. And so I started doing chiropractor, and I too give a lot of credit to my baby being a +3 station at 4 centimeters, like literally just waiting for the gate to open because my pelvis and everything had been so perfectly set up. And she adjusted me twice during labor.
Oh, amazing.
And it was insane. Like he was OP, but like the second he moved, it was like cervix gone and baby out. It was incredible. And so, and I mean, I've been to so many births where I'm like, we need to call your chiropractor. That's what needs to happen. And then boom, everything changes around. So, and massage, also pelvic floor, work is really, really big. A lot of people don't think they need to do pelvic floor work before because they haven't had the baby yet, but it's actually so beneficial. It can really, really help you learn the great technique of pushing a baby out, the actual technique of pushing a baby out. Also, there could be some things that are going on with your cesarean scar, and that might need to be massaged out, or it might need to, like mine adheres to my bladder. It just does. It's great. It happens all the time. And so like even now, my last C-section was 7 years ago. I'm still massaging that and taking care of that. But that can impact things when you're in labor, right? So really, doing all those things, finding the good provider, getting a good supportive team. I believe in hiring a doula 100%. And then most of all, believing in yourself. You need to believe in yourself. If everyone else believes in you, but you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to be walking in a great space. You have to believe in yourself, and it's important and it's hard. It is so hard to believe in yourself, especially if you've had a traumatic experience or, you've been told, like I was told on the OR table, oh, it's a good thing you didn't VBAC. You for sure would have ruptured. That's what he told me. Oh. So in my mind, I keep hearing, you for sure would have ruptured. What am I doing? Why are you doing this to yourself? Like, I'm sitting there questioning myself in labor when instead I needed to be like, you are okay. You are safe. You are surrounded by love. Yeah, everyone knows what we're doing around here. You've done your research. Like you're strong. It's okay, but it's hard. It is really hard.
Yeah. I remember doing, one of my podcast interviews with Barbara Harper. She did a lot about water birth, and she said something that I had to pause for a moment. She said, you don't just birth between your legs, you birth between your ears. And I had to think about that. I'm like, oh yeah, because if you're like you said, everyone can be cheerleading you around, but if you are just going down the drain of, I can't do this, it doesn't matter how great the massage is, someone's rubbing your back and loving you. If you are just suffering and spiraling downward, it is going to continue to suffer downward. So a lot is in, what we say to ourselves and what we carry into this. And I think that's why, while we have very little control of the birth, how we prepare and the confidence we have heading in, it's kind of like whitewater rafting. You get yourself ready and then you go. Like you just kind of have to. That's why I think it's so important to stack everything in your favor. So let's talk a little bit about some red flags. Again, I'm not trying to poo-poo providers, but I have seen a little bit of a bait and switch, can I say? What are some red flags of providers that are not really VBAC supportive? They're a little more tolerant, but maybe not super supportive.
Yeah. And this one can be a really hard one because just like you described with your doula client before, everything was yeah, totally. You're great. We can have a VBAC. Everything's wonderful. And then in labor, they're like, actually, no. We need to do, that can happen and it's hard. So some red flags could be that, your provider is talking a lot about how large your baby looks. And suggesting third trimester ultrasounds when there's no real medical reason as to why. So sometimes a reason for an ultrasound in your third trimester, maybe because at your 20 or your 24 week ultrasound, your placenta was very low lying or covering the cervix, and they need to confirm that it's moved up, right? Which most of the time it does, but that might be a reason why. But it's just we need to check on the baby. We need to measure the baby. No, that's not measurement. That doesn't, no. I'm just going to say no on that one. Talking about your pelvis, you look really small, talking about that. Scheduling a C-section just in case, whatever that means. Having a lot of restrictions, things like, you can totally VBAC if you deliver by 39 weeks spontaneously and your labor is no longer than 12 hours. Something like that. Or
a lot of pressure on somebody.
Yeah, right? Or sure, you can VBAC if you agree to be induced at 39 or 40 weeks, and this is the way we do it. Or sure, you can VBAC if you have an epidural. There's so many, if there are a lot of ifs, you are knowing that your provider is likely more on the tolerant side, but not really supportive side. A VBAC provider that comes in and says, you know what? I see that this is what happened last time, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. And I want to talk about what you want for this birth. What desires do you have?
Yeah, that's a very different attitude and conversation and invitation into let's do this together.
Let's do this. And then following up on that is how can I, as your provider, be here for you?
Yeah.
What can I do for you? That is a totally different, aspect, of things. I interviewed so many providers. It was silly before I even found I was pregnant. And I had so many providers say oh, well, yeah, I probably wouldn't suggest that for my daughter, or I wouldn't suggest that for my wife either. Or your provider was probably right. You probably would have ruptured and your pelvis is too small. And then I had providers saying, based off of what I'm reading here, it doesn't look like you ever really got a chance. And I want to do that with you. I want to give you that chance.
These are really important. So I hope those that are listening and are in that boat to make that decision or again, have the opportunity to have multiple choices, that this is something that they can take heart. And it's hard. It is so hard to question.
It's so hard.
As much as I'm advocate for yourself. I've been on the other side as the patient, and it's hard. It's really hard. So
it's
maybe going
really
with
hard.
Notes. When you're talking to the provider, going with notes, these are what I need, or little notes for yourself, be I can do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In our course, we have, in the manual, we actually have trimester checklists, of things that you can discuss with your provider, to make sure that they're still in line with your desires, because sometimes the bait and switch can be very subtle and it seems like they're being supportive, but really in actuality, they're slightly changing their tune.
Yeah.
So we really suggest definitely taking it in and asking your provider the questions and having that discussion, because it really, really is important. And I want to just drop this note. I understand how hard it is Like it's really, really hard. I did it at 24 weeks, so not as late, but you can change a provider at any time. If someone is not jiving with you or supporting you, don't hesitate to reach out and find another supportive provider. Like, I know it can be hard, especially in rural areas and different countries and things, but
and insurance.
You can switch. And insurance, absolutely. Yeah. You can switch though. You can switch, and you can switch in labor. I had a client that she wasn't a VBAC, but she was like, can I have my nurse? And so she like had her nurse come in, and she was like, can you go find me a different doctor and never have that doctor come in this room again?
Wow. Good for her.
Yeah. I know it was really hard, but the whole environment changed when that provider left, and her blood pressure started going back down, and baby started doing better, and she had a beautiful delivery. So stand up for yourself. It's okay. It's okay to stand up for yourself. Remember that these providers, although we love them and we know that they work hard and most of them are overworked, they work for you.
Yeah. It is a service. It is still a service.
It is a service. You are paying for it. It is a service that you are paying for.
So I wanted to shift gears and talk about the VBAC calculator. So when I was talking to Nicole Rinkins, she was mentioning that. And honestly, I hadn't heard of that. And I hadn't, and maybe I hadn't under a different name. I'm like, is it kind of like the Bishop score? So I would love to talk more about the VBAC calculator.
Yes.
Go. Describe it. How accurate is it? Open the gates.
Yes. And this is a really hot topic right now because a show on TV actually brought some attention to this VBAC calculator, and a lot of attention.
What
and
show?
It has since changed. Crazy enough, based off the show. I mean, I'm not going to say it's based off the show, but it feels like it was based off.
Do you know what show it was?
Do you know what? I have never seen it. We posted it on our Instagram. I don't even know. I don't know the show. I've never seen it, but they talked about, it was a woman and they were like being very frantic, and they were saying, well, you need to go in for a C-section and this and that. And this provider stops them and says, wait, whoa, let's slow down. What are we doing? And she's like, oh, well, this and that. And she's black and this. And he's like, whoa. So change it, make the calculator say she's not black. Then tell me what her VBAC score is. Cause she was like, oh, her VBAC score is like 40% or something. And he's like, yeah. And what if she were white? So what happened with the VBAC calculator is what the VBAC calculator is. I'm going to backtrack and then go back into that.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah. It's very interesting. So the VBAC calculator is quote unquote a calculator that gives you a percentage to tell you how likely you are to have a vaginal birth and succeeding a vaginal birth. And it had questions like age, race, height, BMI, reason for past cesarean, and things like that. And crazy enough, depending on your race, it would drop it or raise it substantially. Depending on your BMI, it would drop it or raise it substantially. And so, they came together, and the providers that put this together, I think they feel that it has a lot of value. As a doula and as a VBAC mom myself, it has no value to me. But unfortunately, there's a lot of providers out there that use it, like a lot. And so now what they did, is they actually took the race off, which is great. Mm-hmm. I think it's awesome. And they kept the BMI on there. So it's like age, height, BMI, reason for past C-section, and if you've been treated for hypertension. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I have messed with the new one. And since then, and then if you've had a previous vaginal birth, that's another one. I've kind of messed with it. And so originally, like with my original answers, it gave me 52.5% chance. So I had half a chance, and it didn't say how many cesareans I've had either. This was just no previous vaginal deliveries. Then I dropped my weight pretty good, like, to what maybe they would say my height is a healthy weight, and it raised it to 60%. Mm-hmm. Then I changed my reason of cesarean, and I kept the weight, and it raised it to 70%. So it's really hard if you can see like from 50 to 70.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big range. And so it's really hard. It's really hard to know. Like, yeah, they give you a number. Julie, my partner, she's had a client that got a 4% chance on the calculator. 4. Had a beautiful VBAC. Beautiful.
And then where did that go? So now that things have been adjusted, race has been taken off, do you know how accurate it is? I mean, 4% to having a vaginal birth where,
yeah.
Is it still being used? Is it, what are people
it's still
finding?
being used. Yeah, it is still being used, and I still don't feel it's that accurate, but that is my personal opinion. If someone is given a percentage, I say, great, take that percentage and throw it away.
Because it goes back to what we talked about with the confidence. So if someone has an unfavorable result, then that goes into their brain of, I'm 4%. I mean, I can't even imagine I'm 4%.
Right.
So is it the kind of thing that someone could, I guess then you would know it's not favorable, because it could be like, oh, if it's good, tell me what if it is. And if it's not, don't tell me. So then you, by default, if you don't get told,
Yeah. And everyone can look up their own, they can do it themselves. They just need to look up like Google VBAC calculator, and you can mess with it. And it's quite interesting. Like how your height and weight and things can change it so dramatically, when ultimately I believe that it is truly the situation that you are put in. And then sometimes it's just the plan. Sometimes we're not destined to have that experience for that birth, and we don't know why, and there's no answer for to know why, what was happening, but we have to trust that was the reason why we had that experience. I did not want 2 C-sections. I didn't want the first, and I definitely didn't want the second, but at the same time, my second was something that molded me and created me into the person I am today. And so although I might not have loved to have another C-section, I am grateful for that experience, and I'm grateful that I had learned more for that second birth, and then even more for my third birth. And so, this calculator, it's just, I see it happening all the time. We have a Facebook group, and then, I'm in VBAC forums, other amazing VBAC forums, and I see this calculator like, oh, I was given a 30% chance, so should I just schedule a repeat C-section? I see it all of the time. And like you said, if you're giving a number, it's a rating, right? Someone is rating you when they have no idea. We have no clue what's going to happen.
So if someone does have a care provider that is using that and it's coming up unfavorably, what would you suggest in how they speak with their care provider and moving forward with having a VBAC?
It's definitely personal, because then at that point you have to decide whether you want to go towards that VBAC or not. And some providers will say, if you're below 60%, I will not support you in this, which is really hard, because if you test 50%, you're like, oh, I'm only 10% less. But, so that's kind of where I would have this conversation with my provider and say, I understand this number, and I want you to know I see it. But I'm not a number in my mind. I am a person that has a different circumstance than all the people in this study that you created this calculator for, because I'm an individual and I am not like anyone else, and I would like to try. And then at that point, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that could be one of those questions when someone is figuring out in the beginning if they have a good fit. Again, if they have that opportunity to have multiple care providers to choose from, that could be a question if they have a chance to interview them. All right, if you do the VBAC calculator and I come up under 60, how are we going to work that out? So that way, at least expectations are set from the beginning, that you're not at 38, 39 weeks and be like, now what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. And you can talk to them and say, okay, so you're supporting me with my percentage. Are all the other providers in your practice supportive of this? Do I have potential issues that I could be running into? So things like that. It's so hard, but it's just a number. And I really just want to scream to the rooftops, you are an individual. You are an individual, and in 7.5 years, I've never seen one birth that was the same. Never.
course, yeah. Even among
I've never seen one person. Yeah. Even the same mom.
I've seen that. Like, I look at my own self that I had 2 kids and their births were dramatically different. And as a doula, I had the fortune of attending several families that had multiple children and their births were very different. So we never know. There's so many factors in how birth unfolds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, it comes down to deciding what you want for you. And then finding that person to support that. And a lot of the times there's the education part. You got to get the education so you can know the pros and the cons of both a VBAC and a repeat C-section.
Yeah. And if you choose whichever people choose is the right choice for them. And that's what I try to tell my students. Like, there's no wrong choice if it's authentic to you. Okay. I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say, as a lot of people think we're only pro VBAC, right? Because we are the VBAC link. But we're not. We are pro good experience.
Yes.
And pro empowerment. And yeah, like, we want you, everyone says healthy mom, healthy baby. Yes. But what about healthy mom, healthy baby, good experience?
Yes.
That experience looks different for everyone. So.
Yeah. And it's never for anyone else to say. I know some of the birth choices I've made that other people would be like, that is just nuts, but it was fine for me. And who am I to ever judge anyone else's birth? I had mine on my terms. I want to support people having theirs on their terms. And it sounds like exactly what you believe in as well. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we come back. What is one tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new or expectant parents? We'll be right back. Okay, we are back. So I feel like from your background as a parent, as a doula, there's probably so much floating in your brain. Pick one out. Just pluck one thought out. What would it be?
Oh, there's so many. Okay, so tips and advice for both first-time parents and
whatever you think is the most valuable, you choose.
Oh man. Education. Because the more educated you are, the more you walk into a birth experience feeling like you have, even though we don't have control of how the birth goes, you have control of what's been done. So for the birth space, I would say education. As a parent, one of my tips is remember that I'm going to go back to kind of what I talked about with birthing, but remember that everyone has a right way. Everyone has a right way to do something and a wrong way to do something. And that doesn't mean that Sally Joe is going to be the same as Sally Jane. The way I feed my baby, the way I birth my baby, the way I burp my baby or dress my baby might be different than this other person over here. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. And I feel like in today's world, we see so many things, I talk about, like, for my physical appearance, like, I'm not Instagram worthy, right? Like, we don't have to be what every blogger does. Like, we don't have to look like that family or do those things. Like, we have to find what's best for us and our family. And it starts from birth and goes all the way up. Right. And so, I guess one of my tips is educate yourself and find the best you.
Oh, I like that. I really like that. Where can people find your work?
Oh, we are all over. So we are at the VBAClink.com. So it's VBACLink.com with the in the front. And we're on Instagram, the VBAC Link, Twitter, the VBAC Link, Facebook, the VBAC Link. We also have an amazing support group, the VBAC Link community on Facebook. Do answer all 3 questions. We're kind of strict. We don't let people in that don't answer questions. We're very strict. We want to know why you're there, and we love to have you there. And then we also have a special group. It's called the CBAC Link community. And that's for people who have gone to have a vaginal delivery and maybe didn't have a vaginal birth and had gone on to have a repeat C-section, because there's a lot of support in that is needed as well. Yeah. We're on YouTube. And then, of course, we have our podcast, the VBAC Link, and we're on every platform for our podcast. We put daily blogs or weekly blogs out and have a ton of information. And then we have a VBAC course.
Excellent.
So we're all over.
And I will make sure all of that is in the show notes because people, again, support education. Again, it keeps also for me, it's support. I feel like education stuff, definitely a piece, but it takes a village. And I know that's such a cliche.
It really does. But it really does. That's why I had 5 doulas, right?
Community is just, we weren't meant to do this alone.
No.
So community showing up is so, so important. I had such a blast talking to you. Thank you so much, Meagan. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys, you just being in your community, listening and learning more about VBAC because it is definitely something that needs to continue to light like fire throughout the world.
I agree. This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge, just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.